Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is about doctors' careers. It's part of my mission to help other doctors create a successful and meaningful career. Today, I'm having a conversation with Will Mangar, and we're talking about the mid-career reinvention. Now, many doctors assume that career decisions are a one-off event, but the reality is that many of us make one decision after another. Over time, our environments change and we also change. Career management means paying attention to what's going on in our careers and in ourselves and repeatedly adjusting to create the success and meaning that gives us career satisfaction. Welcome, Will. Tell me about yourself.
Hi, Matt. Nice to see you again. I think we were talking a few weeks ago actually, and um, I'm a GP. I've just had my, I guess, 18th birthday as a GP principal or GP partner. So I've been a GP principal and partner for 18 years this month, and sort of flirted with uh, being a kind of single-handed and being in a bigger practice. From April, I'm back to single-handed GP. So that's kind of where I'm going to be. I also do a couple of other bits and bobs, work with doctors who are struggling and facing difficulty, do a bit of work with them with the Hurley group. And I'm also very interested indeed in the kind of coaching angle, and it comes mostly to kind of men who struggle with, purpose and meaning, but also doctors as well who are struggling with career. So that's kind of me. General practice takes up the overwhelming percentage and ratio of my time, just because of the big old beast it is. But I try and sort of include some of the other nourishing things in the career, just to keep things fresh, really.
So the topic for our conversation today is mid-career reinvention.
Mm.
What is mid-career reinvention?
I think it's a really good question because I think it can mean anything to anyone, really, and can mean something different to different people. It might be just consolidation and that focusing on the career you have already, the specialty you have already, whether it's general practice or medicine, surgery. It's really sort of maybe drilling down into it and saying, actually, maybe reinventing myself in the sense that I'm consolidating my career. I'm happy with my career. I'm happy where I am. So that could mean that. It doesn't necessarily mean a change or a transformation as an exit out of medicine or a specialty into something else. But I think we spoke before, I think we get to that stage in medicine, usually sort of 15, 20 years into the career. And I've been qualified 23, 24 years now. And you get to that point where actually you need to kind of take stock and think, right, I'm maybe mid-cycle, midpoint through a career. How do is it a time to kind of take stock, review, and sort of appraise my direction, where I'm going? Because it's very easy to get into this kind of hypnotic state, this hypnotic medium of just kind of, wake up, eat, sleep, work, go to bed, repeat. And I think that can just be shocking. It can last years and years, and before you know it, you're in your 40s and 50s, and maybe you're in a career that is kind of no longer aligned with your core values, core beliefs as a clinician. I think what it I think what it underpins, if we sort of take a global view of things, or macro view of as medics, as technicians, engineers within medicine, I think we need to recognize that actually we grow as much as the specialty, the profession grows as well. And that's a critical thing. And I think for me, the kind of Will Mangar of 2005 or 2010 is very different to who I am now. I don't recognize myself professionally now to how I did maybe 10, 15 years ago. A lot of my aspirations, beliefs, aims, motivations are wholeheartedly different to how they are now. So, because of that, I think we have to be very mindful and listen to that little voice in our mind about how we are morphing or evolving as a human, let alone as a profession. And I think we have to take stock that actually we're not a template medic. We're not who we are in 2000. I chose to be if you choose to be a doctor now, that mindset, how does that change as your career goes on? And I think we need to recognize we have to be flexible and malleable within our profession to say, right, I'm feeling that education is important for me. I'm feeling that actually looking after other doctors is important for me. And the critical thing is to respond to that and not to be afraid of the change. Um, I think the problems probably come when we know that maybe we are outgrowing uh, an environment that we've always worked in, and actually we're changing as humans. Our minds changing, our expectations, our ethics, and we stifle or repress that requirement or that urge for change. And I think that's when the problem comes. And I think, as we said, Matt, we hit our 40s and 50s. It's quite a difficult thing to engineer change in our career. It's like I use the analogy, it's like an oil tanker, switching 180 in mid-ocean. It takes miles to do that. You know, it's like a jet plane. If it wants to do a 180-degree turn, it takes 20 miles maybe sometimes to do that if it's going at 3 times the speed of sound. So we need to recognize that to make change takes a long time, and also it takes a huge amount of courage, particularly as we go through life. We start picking up you know the sort of responsibilities of life, the mortgages, the kids, marriage, and all these things. And often that is the primary reason we may remain ISQ and status quo. We don't change. We stay in a career maybe we're not aligned with because it's more convenient not to change. And I think people are often fearful of making change within their career because of the perhaps adverse outcome, which is obviously most of the time it's a fallacy mindset, because actually the real adverse outcome is remaining in a position whereby we're not aligned, or we don't have that kind of identity anymore with the career, because that could be very toxic, negative, and catastrophic to the clinician. So I think it's the kind of mechanistics of change that's quite difficult. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking of how that plays out amongst the surgical consultants that I know, or maybe along my
Mm,
career. That if I think, when you get your CCT as a consultant, then you all of a sudden you've got all of that independent practice and independent technical skills and team leadership,
mm,
and you probably spend, certainly maybe 10 years building on that and refining what you do and perfecting what you do, and probably also creating a niche for yourself as to, what are
mm,
you going to do, what kind of surgery, what kind of patient, etc. And that also happens over time.
mm,
You get sort of CCT in the general aspect of specialty,
mm,
but more often than not, people then find a particular niche in that area, um, and then you kind of have done that and you perfected it and you refined it, and then you kind of get to the stage where it's a job that you're good at,
mm,
and you've created a career, and a practice that is absolutely amazing, and then maybe I don't know whether you kind of whether you get to what's next moment. I always think, when I got CCT, you kind of think, here I am, I've got CCT now, and then
Mhm.
you realize, and what next? Because
What
that
happens
there's
next?
20 years ahead of you
Mm,
of stuff that doesn't change, and of course that's nonsense because things do change, which is what we're discussing today. So
yeah.
it's an element of that, um, or but also that I like your concept that we change. And I remember in one of my appraisers, one of my appraisals, my appraiser said to me, in relation to my clinical practice, kind of said, "Is it all a bit boring?" And I kind of said, "Well, I mean, it's not boring, no, it not at all, but maybe I'm not growing." Yeah, sort of. It's not a
Yeah.
stretch. I've grown into my practice, and my
Mm,
practice has grown, and I've grown alongside it. And then you develop something, and it's not a learning edge anymore for me. It's not a
mm,
stretch for me anymore. And then
mm,
maybe then there comes a question. Okay, what is my next stretch? So
yeah.
I wonder if it's an element of that. But the other thing also, you in your introduction you talk about working with people in relation to um, maybe to things like meaning and legacy.
Mm,
Again, maybe you get to a certain age and you think, well, my ego doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter of how many papers I'm going to publish or how prestigious
mm,
people are going to see me. So those kind of things don't matter anymore. But perhaps I'm going to be dead in a few decades. What am I leaving behind?
yeah.
How will I be remembered? And those kind of things become more important, because probably when I was 20, I probably was much more interested. How many papers can I publish? How many letters
I
can I get after my name?
yeah.
So that that,
I
that
think that
yeah.
no, sorry, mate. Yeah, it's really, really nuanced actually. I think with there is a sea change in us. I think you're right. I think we hit a certain age, and I don't. I think everybody's different. It's a variable thing whereby there's a switch that goes off existentially, psychologically, whatever you want to call it, whereby suddenly, actually, we're working for a different man. As a man in inverted commas, as in the human race. I guess as you say, we're on this kind of ego drive, mid early career, whereby we're chasing the papers, we're chasing the research, we're chasing the kudos, perhaps we're chasing the materialistic aspects of a job in medicine, money, status, etc. And then it suddenly changes, and it's very difficult actually to kind of pinpoint when there's that change, when suddenly we stop looking inwards, stop thinking about the ego and the self, and we I guess it's an actualization process whereby we suddenly start thinking there's a greater good out there, and I need to be of use, I need to be of service. I need to, like you said, Matt, leave some form of legacy, but I guess it then transforms into how will I be remembered, and did I leave a mark in some way? And it doesn't have to be, as you say, it doesn't have to be 500 papers on PubMed or anything like that. I think for me, something clicked. I can't pinpoint it over the last few years, whereby it was just the patient who said, I don't know, I ran into Dr. Manga 3 or 4 years ago. He said something, he changed my way of thinking, and maybe they might remind you of it a few years later. And actually, those are the kind of true kind of nurturing aspects and components of being a medic that are priceless and have no kind of dimension to them. And I think it's that bigger picture of use, like you say, the more kind of significance. And are we significant as medics? Do we make a difference? Do we have alignment with what we do? Do we leave impact? And I think those are the core components. And I think that's possibly what's missing at the moment within a lot of medicine.
Yeah.
Um, and the only follow-up thing I'd say to that is that I think we need to rethink how we do things. I don't have a solution. I always say, if you if you're going to be critical of something, come with a solution. Don't just be critical of it, but I don't have a solution. But we create doctors far too young. I think generally in the Western world, we ask people to decide if they're going to be a doctor at 16, 17, 18 years old. We don't have, the mind hasn't grown by then. The brain hasn't formulated and crystallized. Indeed, I don't think we crystallize as humans, particularly men, until we're in our 40s. Our brains probably stop growing in our 40s as men. I think a lot of men in their 40s probably turn around and say, I wonder if I made the wrong career decision. I think for the girls are far more in touch with, the kind of mind palace that is how we think as medics. And I think they do the more nuanced, complex thinking, if I'm not being overtly sexist, but to our male colleagues. But I think that is the problem. And it's a cascade of issues. We choose doctors too young, and I think we ask doctors to basically make their bed when it comes to a specialty far too young in life. By the time you're 23, 24, you're a doctor. By the time you're 25, 26, 27, you've decided on what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I had no business at, 25, 26, 27 years old, making those very significant decisions about the rest of my life, because my brain wasn't formed. And it's only the last few years that I'm coming to terms with that. We do this dance, this mid-career dance, whereby we say, okay, if I went back, I wouldn't do it quite the way I've done it, but we're left picking up the pieces of what we do. And don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way unhappy with my career. I think the career is, it can be almost like an arranged marriage. It's an unrealistic expectation from day one to suddenly fall in love with what you do. But it's a process, and it took me about 20 years to love general practice, to enjoy general practice. And at the age of 48, I'd only say it's the last few years that, yeah, has been peppered with various, periods of overwhelm and, subacute burnout and recovery. But actually understanding how to craft and sculpt a life in general practice has also allowed me to love it back. And that comes with maturity. So I take some umbrage with the medics who sort of say, oh yeah, if I had my time again, I wouldn't do it again. I'd do something else. I believe, for the right or wrong reason, being a doctor is an absolute privilege. I still think within this country and most of the Western world, we are so highly respected, despite what the tabloids and media do to us. We are treated with real respect and reverence by the general public. And despite the toxic media campaigns regarding, how we're treated and how we're thought of, I don't believe it, because when you speak to patients and you really sort of get down into the nitty-gritty, that respect is paramount. And I don't see that throughout other parts of society and civil service. So I think we really need to genuinely understand that we can't be expected to make these decisions in the 20s. And, the figures of people leaving medicine in the 20s now are horrendous. And I think we need to try and sort of wrap people up a little bit at that age when they're younger and say, look, just be patient, just bide your time, because it evolves, and I think coming back to the reason we're sitting together is we need to nurture doctors through the decades, and we need to provide them with some form of roadmap almost, and specification of what to expect from change in motivation, change in mindset, and how you will start reframing your career. I mean, as a generalist, I'm very lucky because I'm, I guess, suspect a bit agile. I can move from here and do this, try that. If I don't like it, I can do that. I'm relatively flexible. But, for yourself and my colleagues in hospital, you're relatively kind of crystallized in what you do, and to make those changes is tougher. Um, one of my, I think the career itself is, I think we need to kind of frame it. When I did my ENT specialism, I worked with a GP who said that treat your career as a general practitioner or a GP as a pregnancy. You go through 3 trimesters. So you can divide it up into 10 years, 12 years of each trimester. So your first trimester is hard. It's really difficult because you're getting used to being a specialist. You're getting used to everything is novel, new, and frightening. And you can't quite feel comfortable with anything. It's weird. And you're getting to grips with your style, your voice as a doctor, as it were. And that's hard. And then you get into your second trimester, which is, I guess, where I am now, where you have the potential to start enjoying things because you know the job, you know the pitfalls, you know what to do, what not to do, you know what's going to land you up in a GMC hearing, and you know what's going to land you up with a good relationship with a patient. You know how to treat people well, and you start learning how to look after yourself. And you have the experience. You've done your 10,000 hours multiple times, so you enjoy it. And that's the kind of, I guess, the garden party of the career. And then your third trimester is you feel, okay, I'm thinking I might retire in a few years, and I'm sort of on my way out, I guess. So I think there's lots of different ways of framing it.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. There's so much there for careers actually other than that mid-career reinvention, and I really like your thoughts about early career decision making. And if I think when I was making those decisions, it was a different world than now. Yeah. So you were a house officer and nobody knew what they wanted to do. Yeah. And everybody went and did A&E for probably the best part of a year, or went to Australia or traveled the world or worked on a cruise ship or whatever it was. I mean, nobody knew what they wanted to do. Yeah. So certainly none of us thought, right, I've got to write these papers, I've got to do these audits because that's going to give me my portfolio points. So, and in my case, I did A&E and I thought I probably enjoy surgery. So I did the basic surgical rotation, which was 3 years. And, and I rotated around 6 different specialties, but one of them being ENT. And I thought, okay, I think I like ENT. I'm going to be the ENT senior SHO. And then I became the ENT senior SHO. And it was only at that stage, and and by that stage, I would have been probably 5 years after graduating, something like that. At that stage, I said, yeah, ENT really is where I want to stay. 5 years. And then during that role, I then say, okay, what do I need to do in order to be competitive as a candidate? And of course, I did stuff as I went along. Yeah. So, I did all kind of generic stuff, but it was really at that senior SHO level where I thought, okay, I want to do ENT. I've got to have a push in order to do that. So probably for me, much later than career decisions are made now. And the flexibility was there. And I always remember back to mid-career reinvention when I was a registrar early on. I'm trying to think, sort of maybe, I don't know, that had been probably almost 20 years ago now. There was an ITU consultant who retrained as a pediatric anesthetist. Yeah. And he was an anesthetist by training, and and had been an adult ITU consultant probably for 10 years. And then when I was there doing ENT, he was retraining to be a pediatric anesthetist. I kind of thought, Why are you doing that? Like, you're an established ITU consultant. I didn't get it.
Mm,
Probably I do get it now,
yeah.
because, because he's done that and he wanted to do something different. And if I think the people that I have seen that have had really, really great career, I think some
Mm,
people have stayed clinical throughout their career, but their clinical role has changed in the sense that they've
mm,
perhaps gone from being from maybe there was somebody who was absolutely brilliant and a world authority on clinical practice and retired as a world authority, in particular procedures. And I see some
mm,
of those kind of peoples, and those kind of people have been very successful because the whole world comes to watch them operate. Yeah. And I worked
mm,
sort of with at least one person of that ilk, and they were a world authority. The whole world came to see them operate, and that was a really successful career that just went from one clinical achievement to another, right up until
mm.
retirement. Sort of the boundaries of clinical practice were pushed. And that was a really successful clinical career right to the end. But being a world authority, the whole
Of
world
course.
easily operate. Yeah. And then the other sort of thing that I've also seen that has been very successful is when people have changed from being predominantly clinical focused to being predominantly development focused.
Yeah.
Again, if I kind of think of another consultant colleague, and maybe where I am now is a shift from them being the main surgeon who delivers all of these, sort of, to being somebody who is an established consultant,
Mm,
who mentors and supports and brings other people along, and also has an educational role, pastoral, well-being role, career development role, whatever, which is kind of probably maybe a little bit of where I am now, because I've been a consultant 12
mm,
years. I've got a new colleague that started 6 months ago. I've got another new colleague that started in 6 months. And the thing is, Will, they're both better than me. They don't realize that they are, but they are. They're both better trained than me. They have better skills than I have because they've
yeah.
12 years. Their fellowship and their career development
Mm,
is 12 years more recent than me. It doesn't make me a bad surgeon, yeah. But in terms of what they bring and what they know stuff that I don't know, yeah. So they might not see it that way, but I see it that way, yeah. And then the way that I
mm,
see it is okay. This person has better skills. They're a better surgeon than me. They're more up to date than me. That doesn't make me a bad surgeon, but what I can do is I can help them propel their career further forward. I don't need to be the main person that does
mm,
every operation. I can be there in a supportive role and help them
mm,
grow their practice in a way that other people have done for me 12 years ago. And that kind of works really
mm.
well. I think where I've seen problems is maybe perhaps people whose careers have not changed or progressed. Yeah. So
Of
maybe if I
course.
think of some people that got to a certain stage and they didn't have national leadership roles, or they didn't move into more mentoring roles, they didn't have younger
Mm,
colleagues to bring on, or maybe sort of perhaps they had a big ego that thought that they had to remain the primary surgeon. They
absolutely.
couldn't give they couldn't support others.
Mm,
They had to hog, all the fancy stuff. And then kind of career stagnates, and then for 20 years you do exactly the same thing. And then with some of those kind of people, then I think I've seen them, perhaps retire thinking, well, for 20 years I've just done exactly the same thing, nothing's changed. And the problem is they change, as you've outlined. They
yeah.
change, but their work doesn't change, and then
Yeah.
it becomes a mismatch between who they are, and what the work is. And again, it doesn't make them bad doctors or bad surgeons, but when
Mm,
we're talking about career satisfaction, I kind of certainly have one, or I've observed when people's careers haven't changed and progressed, um, and that's been problematic. And I guess maybe it's also just thinking about how people's career progress. It's you've got people early in their careers who who think that they're going to fall in love with something. Yeah, there's this idea that sometimes it comes up in my career coaching with people earlier in their careers, that people think, well, I haven't found something that I love. And you're spot on. Is you don't
Mm,
find a career that you love, yeah. You create it, isn't it? You create
mm,
either you fall in love with it, or you craft and you create something that you like, that you love. So
mm.
there isn't you don't walk along and there's a neatly packaged box with a bow on top that you say, oh my God, I love that, yeah. You know, it just doesn't happen, does it? I don't think it
No,
happens.
you're right. I think you have to be you have to put that effort in to customize and create a bespoke offering, which is whether it's a kind of portfolio career as a GP, but you have to create that nirvana state of being in a happy medium, and whatever that is. I think if that kind of doctor that needs help, career help, is lucky enough to kind of bump into you, Matt, and speak to you coaching, that's fantastic. But I guess scratching my head, I'm what I'd worry about is that the existing kind of resources, the existing kind of structure within certainly the NHS and healthcare maybe isn't geared up to ask those deep dive, really kind of fundamental questions, because I think, going through the NHS appraisal system, I think a lot of doctors are still concerned it's and this is not a thing to kind of browbeat NHS appraisal, not at all. I've been very lucky with my appraisers. I find it a fantastic, positive environment. But I think a lot of us still worry about, whether it's a policing, sort of big stick type structure to, beat us with a big stick, really. And I think I nod certainly to the fact that it's become more well-being and solution based over the last few years. But my worry is that as medics, we don't volunteer the kind of deep stuff, which is actually, I think I'm really unhappy with what I'm doing. I'm stagnating. I'm not enjoying it. I'm getting bored. I'm going into autopilot. Um, which are the antecedents to major problems down the line, the burnout and other things. I think we hold back on that because we worry about being criticized or being, I don't know, sort of highlighted, if it were, that we're a problem doctor, or you know which isn't the case, because the NHS appraisal system and other systems should be there to kind of show us the pathway in order to kind of start rooting around those things. Um, and I think for me, as you've highlighted, we do see lots of us within medicine that maybe are not aware of resources or know how to access the kind of more sort of nourishing uh, AA recovery services that you get within healthcare. And they don't grow on trees. And if you're lucky enough to be part of a PCN or hospital that accesses things like coaching, such as yourself, Matt, then those conversations are very pivotal and important.
Yeah.
And I think the medics who sort of sit there and just ruminate and think, oh my God, I don't want to go back into the surgery today, or I don't want to do this. And I think there's a lot of guilt and attached negative emotion to that. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I've got a great job. What's wrong with me? And I think you've hit the nail on the head. We have to respond to how we change as medics. And even if it's every year we change, or every 5 years or 10 years, we have to listen to that voice and say, okay, I'm now hearing that I'm starting to feel like this. I'm getting pulled into development, into education. Therefore, I need to respond to that. And I really like what you said, which is I'm not the best person in the room anymore. I'm actually maybe on tier 2 or T3. Maybe there's a better operator than I am, in the room. But actually I bring something else. I bring the experience and the kind of father time, and the sort of grandfather thing, which is that commodity that you can't measure, which is gut instinct experience.
I take offense at grandfather.
Okay, let me retract that.
Pick a
Sorry,
different
mate.
word, Will, please. Not grand. No, I'm not ready to be
Oh.
grandfather.
But no, in all seriousness, I think you can't that's the problem we're facing now, I think, within UK Shores healthcare. We're losing this fantastic um substance of experience, particularly within general practice and now probably within hospital medicine. They're saying, oh, you can off you go at 55, you can take your pension. But, cliche alert, but those are the years whereby we're the most useful to people because you can put an arm around a 35-year-old colleague and say, I know it says it in the book, but don't do that. And be like, yeah, but that's the way we should be. Don't do it because it will blow up in your face in 2 weeks. And actually, you can't explain why you've got a feeling about something, but you just have that feeling because you've seen things happen. And I think that's why it's so critical to be to remain fresh, motivated, and enthusiastic within our career because we're trying to get to that really lovely period of that we're entering in, which is the 50s, which is the time where we have that experience and we can, you know, show the subtleties to the profession, to the specialty, to the career that maybe aren't in the books, not in the literature, you're not going to see on YouTube, but it's that valued experience. And again, I think my worry is that we're losing that in medicine, and we don't know what the future of medicine is, whether we run on, kind of more tech-based AI and things. But um, I think that is the end point for us as medics, that kind of wealth of wisdom that you can't train people for. You just have to just be there for several decades. I think that's where we really become useful to our patients and to those around us.
And wisdom is the word that comes up for me. This is what sits by my computer. Well, so it's for people listening. It's an owl, and it's for me. This is
Brilliant.
wisdom, and this is something that I got to in my own coaching, which was about what's my role, what am I doing, where's my career going, and and
Brilliant.
what have I got that other people now don't, and what came up for me was wisdom.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm no
yeah.
longer the best surgeon. I'm no longer the best person technically. There are other
Mm,
people that are better than me. At least two of them in my department, or one to come. But what I have is that wisdom that's come from
yeah.
that I've been around as a consultant, 12, 13, 14 years longer than they have. And I think that, the key there is that is is back to that roadmap.
Mm,
Yeah, what's the roadmap for careers? Because there's no roadmap. There's no. I didn't go to medical school and sort of says,
mm,
you're gonna join. When you're gonna be in your 40s, you're gonna be a sort of the best surgeon in the world, and then when you're gonna go 50, then you're gonna have wisdom. There's no plan. I didn't have that mapped out for me when I was 20. In my
mm,
20s, I was going to be a trainee, sort of a 30s, whatever, and then I was going to be this amazing consultant, and then I was going to have wisdom. That doesn't exist. And part of the issue is that I mean, there's a bit of an unknown path, which makes it difficult, and everybody crafts different stuff for themselves. Yeah, because it may be that you do continue to advance surgical practice. I've certainly seen people do that. Yeah, as I say, the people that from around the world, everybody comes to watch them operate, and
mm,
everybody comes under a course. Yeah, so there is that. That happens, but then is it research, is it education, is it leadership, is it medical
mm,
administration, is it clinical governance, sort of who knows. There's so many different things, but one of the problems that I think is that most of us have no idea what these roles are, and that they exist. And one of the things that I'm doing at my trust is I'm determined to create a map of medical leadership roles, because
right.
there are so many roles out there, that most people have never heard of. And at ICS
Mm,
likewise, and at university likewise, there's a stack of university leadership roles, there's a stack of ICS leadership roles, there's a stack of hospital leadership roles. And like when you start out, like maybe as a 20, 30, 40, or even
mm,
now as a 50-year-old, you have no idea who these roles are. And somebody says it's, I mean, somebody told me, what was the other thing? Somebody told me the medical gases committee. Like I said, well, what's the medical gases committee? And there's such a thing, but somebody sits on that committee. But
mm,
there's all these roles, and people don't see them, and people don't know about it. And maybe what yes, each one of us has to individually create and decide where our
mm,
careers are going. But maybe what all of us as a profession can do, we can give visibility sort of to all of these things that different people are doing. Yeah, because at the moment
mm,
a lot of that, it seems invisible.
mm. I think you're right, and I think we again we just need that superstructure of signposting. I go back to my own when I was at school and we had our A levels, and you did your A levels, and they gave you this great big folder with all the different careers you could do, and it was like pick a life, pick your life that you're gonna have now at 18 years old or 17, or 16, even earlier. So I think this, and I'm sure it happens in other professions, the called more deep dive appraisals and review systems and stakes in the ground, line in the sand. Where are you now? Where would you like to go? I just worry that within our profession, certainly within general practice, we're maybe rigid. We're very binary in our thinking, which is I continue or I retire. Certainly in my age group, the 50s, we're like, I'm going to keep going and then I'm going to just suddenly just drop off the perch and retire. It doesn't seem to be actually I'm going to evolve, and I think we need to hold people's hands to say, right, as you say, Matt, there's a visibility problem here. These are the things that we can think about, the leadership, the mentorship. Let's take you out of 10 clinical sessions, which is making your eyes water, and let's give you a little bit of mentorship to do. Did you know that existed? No, I didn't. Well, it does, and most of the GPs that I work with are just literally head down, getting on with it. Um, and I don't think those conversations are being had. So I think it has to be the future because we have to retain people, and there's two kind of peaks in the distribution curve at the moment with medics. We've got this peak at 24, 25, 26, whereby what are we losing 30, 40% of doctors off the NHS? They're just vanishing from registration. Whether they're going to Australia, Canada, or New Zealand, or whether they're just going into the city or going into tech, which is just a tragedy. And I don't know what we're doing. Are we trying to retain these people? Are we doing anything about it? What's our effort like? Are we really going through the motions to stop people disappearing? Are we following them up? So that's one of my worries. And the other worry is how instrumental are we in the second age group of certainly the medics in general practice, who are kind of getting to their 50s and then hanging up their spurs, as it were. Are we really sort of going the extra mile and saying, don't go, you can still say if we I mean, this is what the retainer scheme was about. Can we sort of keep people involved? Can we give them other roles which keeps them fresh and interested? Um, I just, again, I don't want to be negative, but how, we need to lose this apathy about loss of good people, really good people within the community in hospital medicine. We really need to try harder to retain people, even those in their 20s leaving the profession, and those at the kind of other end of the spectrum who are just getting disillusioned. Because we'll end up with a huge brain drain within the profession if we're not careful.
A lot.
Anyway, there I've said it. Sorry,
A lot of that will, a lot of that is to do with the structures that we work in. I also say
Mm,
that a lot of that is in your control and in my control as well, because a
of
lot of that
course.
I think is about how we treat each other, how we support each other, what expectations we have of each other, and certainly when it comes to the early career doctors, what kind of role models are we? So if there are people 23, if they're like the people in
Mm,
the 20s that I talk to, they all sort of say every GP consultant I see is unhappy. Everybody moans and complains, and nobody's enjoying the
mm,
work. And sometimes it feels like maybe I'm the only person. I have a great job. Yeah, sort of, sounds like you have a great job, Will, too. Yeah, but I'm kind of thinking, surely you and I can't be the only people that actually enjoy our jobs and have a great job. But the message that people in the 20s
mm,
get is that everybody's unhappy and everybody's miserable. And I just don't think that's the case. Yeah, but people need to
mm,
articulate the good bits that are that
mm.
those of us that are older need to role model the bits that we enjoy about our
And
career.
this is why what you do in your coaching, your podcast is absolutely critical at this time to put this not spin, it's not positive spin, it's just a showcase
Yeah,
for us as medics. And I think it's absolutely mandatory, required, valid, and totally supported by all of us because there's not enough of this stuff going around. It's all doom and gloom. And actually what you're doing is saying, right, look, there is this, if you're willing to look, it's around, it's available. And you said you're enjoying your career. I'm enjoying my career. I'm enjoying where I am, and it's fantastic. But it, like you said, it doesn't come in a neatly wrapped box with a bow on it. You have to really work at it. And that's the element that is missing from medical education, which is you don't only have to work hard as a doctor to see all your patients, do all your operations, and get out the door and go home and have dinner. You've got to work hard at it's like working hard at a marriage. It's not about being there. It's about working hard at being a good husband, good wife, and knowing what's required. What are the elements of a good marriage? The same thing is how to be a good career professional. It's those are the things that we need to be helping people with,
yeah,
putting arms around people and saying, actually, it's not about only being a good doctor, it's about being a good professional. And the professionalism within medicine is something that's becoming grayer and grayer as we just losing that kind of string, that thread. And actually, to be a good professional, you have to self-regulate and self-monitor. We can't leave it to other people. The appraisal system, despite what I've said, we have to learn to be able to look for the little signs in ourselves that means actually a change is due or you're growing,
yeah.
not growing in a negative way, in a positive way. And you need to respond to that and to take action and activate a new sequence to build on what you're doing. Um, and I think that, like you said, they'll see Matt and they'll say, "Oh, well, Matt's happy. He's got a great career. That must have just happened by accident." No, actually, Matt has spent hours and hours and hours sculpting, crafting, and working away at a career that is meaningful for him.
And I
And
still do.
you've built this from the bottom up, and it's like Lego bricks. It's about that works, that pays me money, but this is nourishing. And I think those are the conversations we must be having with our colleagues, because it's all about, oh yeah, get through this, tick this box, do that. But it's about, no, you need to, it's like an ultra marathon. You need to just pay attention to your feeding, your pace strategy, all of these things. And that, the pace strategy in medicine, how we sort of pace ourselves through the job and how we sort of look for the long game, the marathon, not the sprint, is so critical.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what's missing from our education is career
Mm,
management, yeah, not
of
career
course.
progression as a stepwise thing, but a long career management. How do I manage myself? How do I manage my environment, my career, and that is a career long endeavor for it to be successful. I'll bring us
Mm.
to a close, Will, and maybe if I can ask you to
Thank you, Matt.
summarize, what would be your top tips for doctors at work?
Um, I just wonder if I'm going to say the same thing I said last time, which is a little bit boring, but I think it's listen to the little voice. You know, that I always say that to people. If there's a little voice in the back of your head saying something, don't ignore it,
Yeah,
because it's all about consciousness. It's about really the conversation that you need to have. The second part of that is give yourself the bandwidth so that you can hear that little voice, because it's too easy to spend your life on autopilot doing things, drowning out life, drowning out the voice with just noise of, busyness and the illusion of busyness. But ring fence times in your life where you have that that blue time, that unstructured time, whereby you can have that free form thought process, because that's often when you have these pivotal moments, these epiphanies where you say, hey, I'm not an operator, I'm a developer, I'm a educationalist, and actually you'll go, wow, where did that come from? But if we don't give ourselves the opportunity or the time to have those thoughts, I think we will never evolve or grow in the direction we really need to.
wonderful. Thank you very much, Will.
Thank you, Matt.